that covers me in the night. Time of Armageddon, we find peace in the light. On the golden streets, we have eternal light. Even in death, JD shine bright. Words from the Bible, techniques of survival. For the present day, Jesus, disciple, represent with your colors. You've been forgiven.
Welcome back to God Among the Gangs. We've been having a great time. I know that those of you that are following us on our podcast, I'm sure you enjoyed Marlon's testimony. It was just incredible. What a great young man. I got so much to talk to you guys about. Today, I'm going to be focusing a little bit on the preventive part of our ministry because, the gang outreach is intervention, which means that we intervene with gangs. And if you already heard, we had gangs sign peace treaties. We supervised beatdowns so that kids can get out of gangs, and we had a gang church. I mean, all this is intervention, going straight to where the gang members are and reaching them where they're at. But we also did gang education, and in gang education, we were helping churches as well as police departments and other entities that deal with young people, prisons and things like that. And we were doing training for them on how to read gang graffiti, um, churches on what to do if an influx of gang members shows up at your church and things like that. But then we had the preventive part of it. So it was intervention, it was education, and it was prevention. And in the preventive part of it, we really started to try to reach out to kids that weren't in gangs yet, but were at risk. And the success that we had there is just, I mean, all three phases of our gang outreach was just incredible. But I enjoyed the preventive part of it almost as much as I did the intervention. I didn't like anything more than the intervention. It's nothing more fun than reaching gang members right where they are, going into the hood, you know what I'm saying, turning a gang Bible study or a gang meeting into a Christian Bible study. And nothing tops that, in my opinion, seeing gang leaders get saved. But the prevention was like right there. It was just so much fun. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that because one of the things we did in order to prevent was we went to the high schools and the middle schools. And no exaggeration, Dade County is the second largest, Miami-Dade County is the second largest school district in the country after Los Angeles County or Orange County. And we went to every high school. We went to every middle school. At the time, we didn't go to every elementary school because we focused more on those kids that were between 13, maybe even 12 to 18. But we went to all the schools, public schools, during school hours. And at the same time, we went to Christian schools, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in just a few minutes. But I just think the whole story of how we got into the public school system needs to be told. And the things that we saw there just have to be talked about. So I started off the school outreach really because my oldest son, Alex, probably 12 years old at the time, he got into some trouble at school with one of the teachers. And so my wife and I went over there to talk to this teacher who had verbally assaulted him for nothing. I know my kids. And listen, I know the things they're capable of doing. And Alex, my oldest son, who's 41 now, is not the type that is going to be disrespectful in any way to somebody that's an adult and somebody in authority. And so I went to the school, which happened to be one of the middle schools that I went to. Now remember, I only got to seventh grade. I never graduated seventh grade. Last grade I ever completed was sixth grade. And I never graduated. I dropped out in seventh grade. I failed it 5 times. And then I did get my GED. I also went to Bible school. I got college and different things. All that was through the power of Jesus Christ, to be honest. But I didn't go to school. But I did go to this school that my son was going to, which was called Palm Springs Middle. I did go there for probably 2 months because I kept getting kicked out. That's why I kept failing seventh grade. So I got kicked out of my school, then I got kicked out of another school, then I got kicked out of Palm Springs, and then ended up in another school, and then I got kicked out of Dade County schools, and then I got sent to Opportunity School and never made it to Opportunity School. So I ended up, dropping out at the age of 16. The day I turned 16, I dropped out of school. My dad literally took me to school. And my dad always had a gun on him. I mean, he had 60 guns, and I'm not exaggerating. And I woke up that morning on my 16th birthday with a gun to my head. And he said to me, grab me by the shirt, pick me up. He goes, let's go to school. And I go, why? He goes, you're dropping out. I go, you're going to force me to drop out? He goes, yes. I go, I was going to drop out anyways, but okay, at least I got a ride. And he told me, if you drop out of school, he goes, I'm going to give you my car, and I'm going to take you today to get your driver's license, and I'm going to give you my car for the full day. You don't have to bring it back till tomorrow. I said, good deal, let's go. So I went to school, I dropped out, got my license that same day on my 16th birthday. I took the car, and I had 2 accidents, both of them gang related. That was, it was not a good day for my dad, especially. But that's how that's how I dropped out of school. But I went to see this teacher at this school that I used to go to, and after we finished, I met with the principal and with the teacher that had verbally assaulted him, and I just happened to ask. I go, listen, is there still a teacher here called Mr. Mack? Because I didn't know any of the teachers because I never went to class. But I did go to that class a couple of times, and I'll never forget that I was in this class. And I went there for other reasons. I'm not going to get into why, but that's the only reason I went to that class it wasn't to study, believe me. And I remember looking out the window, and my cousin was there. And my cousin didn't go to that school, but he was there visiting his girlfriend. And so I opened up the window, and I yelled out his name. And the teacher was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I was in the second floor. And I said, my cousin's down there, and I haven't seen him. I hadn't seen my cousin in about a year and a half. He goes, are you serious? I go, yeah. I thought he was going to get mad at me because he doesn't go to the school. He was actually a high schooler, and this is a middle school. And he goes, tell him to come up here to my classroom. And I was like, you serious? He goes, yeah, family's important. I said, really? So I told my cousin, come up here. He had gone to that school. And I go, I'm in Mr. Mack's classroom. He goes, I know where it's at. So he came up, and then he goes, listen, you're excused from the class. You can talk to him as much as you want to outside. I was blown away. I'd never met a teacher. I had been impacted by very few teachers in a positive way. In fact, I can't think of anyone else that impacted me in a positive way, at least not right now as I'm speaking. But this guy blew me away. Allowing me to step outside and reconnect with my cousin, to me, was so important. And so I'm sitting here years later with my son, who's now 12, and I'm like, is Mr. Mack still here? She goes, he's still there at the same classroom. The female principal told me. And I said, really? I said, would you mind if I go visit him? She says, he's at the same place. You're welcome to go up there. So I went up there and I knocked on the door. Mr. Mack opened. And I said, you're not going to remember me because I was never in your class. Literally, I probably came 3 or 4 times. I go, but I just wanted to tell you that you impacted my life when I was here. And I told him the story. And he goes, wait a second. Are you Mario Forte? And I said, yes. How do you know my name? He goes, I've been praying for you ever since back then. He goes, you're the worst gang member that ever came to this school. And I just knew that I needed to reach you. And then all of a sudden, you were gone out of the school. You were kicked out. I was trying to win you over when I let your cousin come up. He said, and I never stopped praying. He goes, I pray for you every day. I'm like, this is crazy. And I said to him, well, I'm a pastor now. He goes, you are? He goes, I'm a Christian, and I'm a leader at my church. He goes, and you got saved? I go, yeah. So I started to briefly tell him. And he said, would you mind stepping inside of my classroom and telling my students what happened? I said, of course not. I said, but aren't you going to get in trouble? He says, I only teach here to win kids to Christ. I don't need the money. He literally was a millionaire. He says, I'm only here to reach kids for Christ. I see it as a mission ground. They want to fire me, they can fire me. I said, man, I rap. I got a boom box. Mind you, my wife was downstairs waiting for me in the car because I said, I'll be right back. I'm going to go say hi to Mr. Mac. So she was pregnant with my son, Jonathan. And I ran downstairs. I go, babe, I need the boom box. You know, we used to have boom boxes back then. And she goes, for what? I go, I'm going to rap in Mr. Mac's class. She was like, what? I go, come with me, come with me. So I went up there. I put on some music. I did a couple of songs. And then I went into my testimony. What do you think happened? The classroom had a wall. And there was another classroom next door. The teacher came over, heard the music, heard me speak, said, what is this? He says, it's one of my former students who went from gangs to God. Lady was like, really? He goes, yeah, you should have him in your class. She said, yeah, as soon as he's done, bring him over. So I went to that classroom. And the same thing happened. There was a wall. And the classroom next to that, the teacher heard it. So this was one of Mr. Mac's former students. He went from gangs to God. So they invited me. I went to the fourth classroom. And now it was a big thing. The principal had found out what was going on, and she was coming up, and she actually came up into the classroom, and they're talking to me about doing some type of assembly in the auditorium. And then all of a sudden, I'm waiting for the kids because the bell had rung. My son Alex comes into the classroom. Here am I, his mom, who's probably around 7 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant, the principal of the school, and his teacher. Mind you, this is a big school. This is not like, a small school that has 2 or 3. No, no, no. This is a huge school. At one point, it was the largest school in Dade County. It was so big when I went there that they had school from 7 to 12 for one age group and then 12 to 5 for another age group. I've never heard of that happening in any high school. In the history of Dade County, I've never heard of anywhere else where that happened. That's how many kids that school had. And he's like, Dad, what happened? I said, no, man, I'm going to rap. And then I'm going to share my story here. He goes, here? I go, yeah. He goes, you're clowning, Dad. Tell me the truth. What happened? I said, no, I'm serious. I'm gonna share what God did in my life, and I'm gonna rap. And he was like, oh no, not my dad in my classroom. It's like, so I did it. I shared. The principal of that school, when I finished, received Christ with me. She invited me to go to the school and speak to the entire school in the auditorium. And it was the first time I ever hit a school. Then I thought about it. And the school that I had dropped out of and the school that I really would consider my school, even though I went to many, I was like, I need to go to that school. Like, that's where I need to go back. I need to go back where I did so much damage. Because I was only in that other school for like 2 months. At this school, I'd been there like 3 years. And it was total chaos while I was there. And so I said, I need to go back there. And so I said, I'm just going to go and talk to the principal. And it was the same principal of when I was there. And I said, listen, I asked for a meeting with him. I go, look, I'm so-and-so. I ended up dropping out. And, I went to Palm Springs and I spoke to the kids at that school. And I'd like to share here. He said, you got 10 seconds to get out of my office. There's a restraining order on you being anywhere near the school. If you don't leave, I'm going to have you arrested. I was like, whoa. So I stepped out and I left. And I said, I'm not giving up. And I said, you know what? I'm not allowed to be within 100 feet or 100 yards or something. So I set up shop about 100 yards from them. I took boxes and boxes of Bibles. And I put my boombox down on the ground just far enough where they couldn't call the police on me. And before you know it, we had drawn a crowd. Kids were coming from everywhere. We're giving out Bibles. We're giving out Bibles like we're passing out chocolates. Everybody, give me a Bible, give me a Bible. So powerful that before I finished, a news station was there filming us live, what we were doing. And they were saying, pastor gives out Bibles to kids like chocolate. And the kids are like, give me one, give me. We ran out of Bibles. We took easily 100 Bibles. I would think way more than that. And we ran out of Bibles within 3 minutes. And the kids were like, how can I get a Bible? How can I get a Bible? And when that thing came out on television, and the news and everything hit the principal, he was like, I need you to come. I'm gonna open up the doors for you. And so I was able to speak there, and God began to do something in the public school system. And I'll never forget the day my son was born, Jonathan, just a few months after that. I spoke at Hialeah Miami Lakes Senior High School. And he was born at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was there for an assembly at 10. I'd gotten into that school, and then from there, I just schools started opening up. But there was no, there was um, no real plan behind it. It was just kind of like they just called me, you know what I'm saying? I just show up and I'd speak to the kids, and then they might tell a school where they knew another teacher or a principal knew another principal, or the activities director knew, the other activities director or whatnot. And so I would end up going to another school. And little by little, the team started growing. So I was youth pastoring at the time at Alpha and Omega. We had a lot of rappers that joined us. They were good, really good, really, really, really good. And we had a group called the Thugs, which stood for True Hearts Under God's Service. They were great dancers. We got a skit team together with my bro, Shawnee Sean, best hype man in the history of Miami-Dade County. He was amazing. We put together a strength team, which I'm going to get into maybe either in another segment or maybe in a little while. And we started putting together this show that was powerful. We'd talk about drunk driving. We had a gentleman, Kairos. Kairos is doing amazing right now. Just a shout out to you, brother, if you're watching. Kairos would speak. You could hear a pin drop as he would talk about his daughter, who was 14 years old, and she had lost her life because the person she was in the car with was driving drunk. And he would talk about how he'd always dreamed of dancing her 15s. You know, us Latinos, we celebrate Lo Quince, the 15th, and how he, dreamed his whole life of being able to do that special party for her and one day give her away in marriage. And as he would speak, the children, the youth, they were in tears. I'm talking about so powerful. We had a police officer, a good friend of mine, who was a police officer where I was clowning at before I became a Christian. And he would tell the story of how he was always trying to arrest me and chasing me. And then here we are together, and then we had a paramedic that would come with us and would talk about, these accidents of people that are under the influence, and the things that he had to see as a firefighter, as a paramedic, responding to scenes of, even one child that was decapitated, that he had to be there and be one of the first people on site to find I think it was an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old that was decapitated because they didn't have their seatbelt on or whatnot. And so we started putting together this team. And then, and you're going to see this in a little while, maybe the next episode, where we joined forces with a great man and a great friend of mine. His name is Rolly Gonzalez, known now as Share Your Heart. But Rolly's he's a trendsetter. He's a man that's leaving behind an incredible legacy. Not because he's done, because he's not. But I mean, if he left right now, what he'd leave behind is just incredible. And we joined forces with Rolly, and he kind of started giving a little bit of meat to what we were doing, and so we created a team called the For Real team. The number 4, and then the word real. And really started saying, let's get schools booked. Like, let's actually go after them. Let's take ex-gang members that were enemies, a lot of them my enemies, or members of gangs that were enemies of mine, that now rap together, that now share their story. And so Rolly started really taking the lead on that, as far as, getting us connected with schools. We got a letter from the Miami-Dade County School Board, from the superintendent. Now every school is autonomous, which means that they can't tell every school to have us. But they wrote a letter saying, we highly encourage every school to do an assembly with the For Real team, because it was just incredible. I mean, the way we did that, and the kids were so impacted, and just the way the whole program was, just we break the ice with this crazy skit where we would incorporate some of the kids from the schools. And um and and it was great because we had people that did the skit that would practice it, and they knew their lines, but then we'd pick 2 or 3 kids from the school. They didn't know the lines. That was done on purpose. So when they had to speak, they didn't know what to say, so they'd invent what they were going to say. And it just caused a great reaction from all the kids, and they'd be laughing and, and just carrying on. And it was supposed to happen that way. We were breaking the ice. And the kids were like, this is cool. This is not your regular assembly. This is not, somebody coming in here and giving us lectures. I mean, these people are cool. Like I said, Sean, which, hopefully I'll be interviewing him at some point. Sean was so key to what we were doing because, I mean, he was the face before we'd start speaking. He'd be the guy that would, go out there and take people out dancing and, do the rap contest and host the rap contest, the dance contest, and just, he's a hype man, a true hype man. And he would lead this skit. And I'll never forget that at one of the schools that we went to, Michael Crop, it was right before summer, and we were looking for, like always, our volunteers. Mind you, when we asked for volunteers, always the most outgoing kids would be the ones that would raise their hands. Usually what we might call the class clowns, which is exactly what we wanted. We were trying to get those guys because we knew they'd be funny, and we knew that they'd get the people to laugh, and we knew that we get the crowd, invested in what we're doing. And so in one of those that we were asking for volunteers at Michael Crop, a young man raised his hand, and he became our volunteer. And I think we had two of them in that school, and he didn't know what to say, but he was hilarious. We prayed with him after. I didn't know that that summer he would be murdered. His name is Trayvon Martin, or was Trayvon Martin, and he prayed with us before he died. A lot of controversy as to everything that happened. This kid was a good kid. He was a class clown, in a good way, not a bad way. He was a very likable kid. Definitely loved by the school, and obviously it was a tragedy what happened, but you just never know who you're gonna reach. You just never know when you're gonna pray for somebody, and it might be their last prayer. From Michael Crop, when the school ended, I think he had family. I think it was in Orlando or near Orlando, and this is where he was killed. These kind of things happened at many schools. I'll never forget at North Miami Senior High. I was at there was a Jewish teacher. She was the school activities director, and a beautiful, amazing person. I mean, just a heart of gold. And she was a big promoter for our ministry. We went to North Miami Senior High, I don't know how many times, just because she invited us. But I'll never forget that we went one year there, and then there was curtains, and so the curtains had opened, and then we started performing, and then 45 minutes later the curtains closed. And when those curtains closed, she ran around the curtains, and she said, I need what you have. I need it. I need it. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, the peace that you have, the joy that you have. I need that. And I said to her, on this side of the curtains, all the kids were on the other side. I said, it's Jesus that we have. And she said, I'm Jewish. Does it matter? Can I receive Jesus? I said, no, you can receive Jesus right now. And so I prayed with her, and she received Christ. And again, she wrote letter after letter after letter. She was very instrumental in getting the school board to write a letter of endorsement for us. And I'll never forget one year that we were there, Marlon, who you just saw, he was going to be one of our speakers and probably one of our rappers. He participated in different ways. And there was a friend of his that had gotten out of prison. I think he had done like 8 years. And he had gotten out of prison that morning. And so he called me up, and he was like, Pastor, I'm going to be a little late to the assembly. Mind you, we'd be there all day. So he might get late to the first one. He goes, I'm picking up my friend who just got out of prison. And I'd like for him to, come with me. I want him to hang out with me. I want to lead him to Christ. And I said, yeah, man, bring him. Of course, that'd be cool. And so he brought him. Mind you, this was before 9/11. It's very easy to get into the schools back then. It's a little bit harder now. But he brought him, and I thought about it, and this man wasn't a Christian. His name was Alan Shepard. And I said, it'd be good to have Alan share. He's just fresh out of prison. He did 7, 8 years. Got out today in the morning. It'd be great for him to share with the kids what prison life is like. And so I called him to share for 5 or 10 minutes about prison. he was blown away that I would trust him and give him the mic to speak to, you know, hundreds of kids in that assembly, and throughout the day, thousands of kids. He couldn't believe that anybody would trust him enough to share. He's like, this is just insane. Well, he ended up coming to Christ with Marlon. And then a few years later, actually a lot of years later, he ended up bringing Level, Rene Martinez, to Christ. And so Level gets saved from Alan Shepard, who started walking with God initially the day he got out of prison because Marlon shared with him the gospel. And I don't think he got saved that day, but I think it was a process that began the day he got out of prison. And so this is how God works. These are the kind of things that the Lord does that are just completely. This is why I'm telling you, I enjoyed the preventive part of it almost just as much as the part of, you know, the intervention. So many war stories there. You know, I never forget going to a Christian school, and they were like, "Listen, we want you to come. It's just preventive. There's no gang members here. I mean, these kids, their parents all have money, you know, and but we'd like for you to scare them a little bit. Would you mind coming?" I said, "You know what? I'll come. It's preventive. It fits." Because I did everything through the lens of intervention, prevention, or education. I wouldn't waste my time doing anything else that didn't fall in those three categories. And I said, okay, I'm going to go. So I shared there, I shared my testimony, and I asked the school to allow me to share with the kids one on one, whoever wanted to talk to me after I finished. And they were like, we're a Christian school. They can miss their next classes. You know, that's okay as long as they're talking to you and they're getting, you know, counseling or mentoring or whatever it is. I was so surprised because we had 17 kids stay behind. And one by one, they had to wait. I met with every one of them one by one, one by one. Every single one of them was gang affiliated in a private school. And one of the girls that was there that I spoke to was the leader of the Latin Queens, the baby Latin Queens, which means they were underage. She was probably 16 years old. And she was in that school because at the high school that she was going to, they had done a drive-by on her. And her mom was able to scrape up all the money she had and pay the tuition to go to this private school and now go there instead of public school. What she didn't understand is that the drive-by didn't happen from kids that were in this public school that she was in. It was from people that weren't going to school, probably dropouts or older people that had done this drive-by. And now by her being in this private school, the whole school is in danger. And most parents are dropping off their kids in this private school, and they can't even imagine that there's any situation happening. They can't even imagine that their kids are in danger of a drive-by shooting at any moment. And so a lot of times, you know, we think we're putting our kids and we're setting them up in a better place. And listen to me, gangs, especially back then, had infiltrated all walks of Miami society. It's not there now. It's not happening right now. But I will tell you that it's growing. And this is why God called me back to start sharing the stories of Now It Can Be Told in order to inspire adults, to mentor kids like they did with Marlon, to inspire people to reach out to young people to collaborate with us, reaching gang members right now, to inspire young people that are in gangs to get out. And so the school ministry was definitely one of those things that revolutionized our city. I could sit here just for days and talk to you about the different things that happened at the different schools that we went to. But it was incredible. We would go to schools. We had to stop because we were having kids fill out cards. And we would want they would let us keep their information. Now, I want this to penetrate. We're in a public school, right? We're not, and listen, I'm not dissing Bible clubs. Bible clubs are needed for Christian kids that go to a school and everything they're seeing around them is bad and drugs and, you know, kids just clowning and doing all kinds of stuff. And so Bible clubs meet before school, during lunch or after school, right? And so this is a great place for a Christian young man or woman to be able to just go for 30 minutes or 45 minutes and just fellowship with other believers and get through that day. Okay. Sometimes Bible clubs are used to do pizza parties and some outreach events. And we were connected 100% with the Bible clubs. And we were sponsoring pizza parties all over the city. Not against that. I was a youth pastor at a church. So I believe in, keeping our kids safe and sound. And so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but through the For Real ministry, we were reaching kids in the public school system during school hours. The entire school would come to the assemblies, and then to top it off, they would allow us to give them our cards, which is incredible because you're not supposed to do that. So we would take cards, and what we would do, depending on the school that we were at, we would partner with a local church. So, our church was in Kendall, but if we were in Alapata, we were in Wynwood, wherever we were, we'd find a church and we would partner with them. And then we would tell the kids, tonight we're going to be at this church and we're going to be able to do more things than what we've been doing here. It's going to be even better. And it's going to be at this church, which is 2 blocks from you, 3 blocks from you. And so that way we would get the kids to make the crossover into the church. That went really well, but we would give them cards. But then I don't know what school it was, they wanted to get feedback from the kids. So they wanted to know if they were going through anything. Kids started filling out cards where they were telling us about they wanted to commit suicide. They were so depressed. They were bulimic. They were hooked on drugs. They were gang members. And it just came to a point where the school said, we got to stop this because, we're getting ourselves in trouble. You know what I'm saying? Because the moment we know these things, that we just have to, it's going too far. And they were like, just give them your cards, invite them to your events. But the best part about it was how we shared Christ. And in the middle of the school day, we shared Christ. And it was so amazing because what we would do, for example, me, and we had other people share. And all the stories were amazing. We had one girl that her testimony was that she was kidnapped when she was 12. And she met a guy online whom she thought was 13. So her and her friend started, chatting with these 2 guys that were kids, and they convinced them to skip school and meet somewhere. But when they met there was 2 adult men there who kidnapped them and brought them from another state to Miami. They lived as slaves, sex slaves, for many years, to the point where they became completely warped into this, where they were brainwashed and they stopped responding to their names. One of the girls was killed because this is usually the fate that happens to these girls. They come to a point where they're useless to the pimps and to the people that have made them their sex slaves. And this girl would talk about how she was able to start going out and prostituting herself, and they wouldn't have to watch her anymore because they knew she'd come back. This is called the Stockholm Syndrome. If you've ever heard of that, it means where you fall in love with your captors to the point where you feel like they need you and that without you, their life is not complete. And it's a form of brainwashing where they can begin to allow you to leave. And a lot of times people say, but you were kidnapped. How did you go to the grocery store and buy stuff? And, how did you go out and prostitute and come back home? And it's called the Stockholm Syndrome. And you can look that up if you want to, but it's very powerful what they do to these kids. And she stopped responding to her name. And one day while she was prostituting herself, she received Christ. And she says that when she received Christ by one of the people that was passing by as she was on a street corner, that she was like, I need to get out of this life. Like she came back to herself, like the prodigal son. She came back to herself. And she said, I can't go back because they're going to kill me. And she says that it was just a little while later, like a couple of hours later, she didn't go back to the house and she's somewhere and the news is on. And all of her pimps and everybody that kidnapped her, they did a bust. They did a raid and they arrested everybody. And she actually got arrested too because she was part of it. But then she wasn't sent. Then she would go to the schools and tell the girls about the dangers of, meeting people online like this. and not knowing who you're talking to. I know that the podcast I did with my wife, back then there used to be these party lines. There'd be 10, 20, 15 people on a party line. And there'd be guys, and then girls would join, and girls would invite their friends, and you'd meet people. Well, we used to go on there to meet girls, to find out when their parents weren't home, to find out, when they were alone or when nobody was home, to break into their homes and to steal all their stuff. We'd find out if their parents had money or not. Listen, it's very dangerous. This was the team that we had. And so it's very, very powerful. But it came to a point where they were like, listen, you can't do the cards. And then we said, we got to share Jesus. So we would tell these stories. And for example, I would tell my story and I'd be like, I usually don't get into a lot of details about everything I did. I usually just say my whole life was a crime. I woke up in the morning and I'd be committing crimes to the time I went to sleep. How many crimes I committed, I don't know. My whole life was a crime. But I might get into, in a school, I might get into some specific crimes that have statute of limitations. Notice how I said that? And then I would tell them and they'd be blown away by some of the stuff I seen and experienced. And then all of a sudden I would just say, and then one day my whole life changed and now I'm a pastor and now I'm doing this, 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 this. Then we'd open up for questions and answers the last 5 minutes. Without fail, every single time, the first question out the kid's mouth was either to me or directed to one of the other people. Like Chino Life was one of our friends who was there when Trayvon Martin was chosen, who had AIDS and was healed from AIDS. And he'd tell his story. Also a gang member, saved in prison. I like to think he's a grandson because he got saved through somebody that got saved through somebody that, you understand what I'm saying? And so they would say, but what happened? How did you get healed from AIDS? It sounds crazy. How did you stop gangbanging? This is insane. How did you do that? And I would say, this was the key. This is my personal experience, not the school's, not the principal, not the activities director, not any of your teachers. This is my personal experience. You're asking, it's student initiated. That's the key. In the public school system, everything has to be student initiated. You know how they say you can't talk about God in schools? That's a lie. That's a lie. Teachers can talk about God. It just has to be student initiated. If it's initiated by the student, the teacher is even allowed to respond. So I would say, this is not there. This is my experience. I gave my life to Jesus. And then I would tell my story of how I met Jesus on one of the darkest days of my life and how I met Jesus and how he turned my life around. And then no doubt we'd stick around, and I would say every school allowed us to pray with the kids, lead kids to Christ. It was just incredible. We never had one lawsuit. We had one kid at Michael Crop, actually, whose father was a lawyer. And, they were Jewish, and they said that we shouldn't be talking about Jesus, and complained. But that's as far as it got. Think about all the high schools, the thousands upon thousands of kids that we reached, and we got one complaint saying that maybe we shouldn't be talking about Jesus anymore from a Jewish lawyer. Other than that, no problems ever. The relationships that were established were just incredible. What God did was incredible. And you know what? We're going to be doing it again. We're going to be doing it again. I was just invited to a school for this Friday. My friend Prof sent me and said, they're inviting you to go to this school come Friday. I was texting with our young adults pastor when that text came in. And I was telling him about how we had to go back to the schools and how I needed them because I can't keep doing this stuff. I'm 42 years old now. I see, I'm not 42 years old. I'm 57 years old. Not ashamed of it because I don't look it and I don't feel it. But I'm 57. To what point am I going to be? We need our youth pastor. We need our young adults pastor. We need to form a team again because a lot of those people that were on that team now are in their 40s, late 30s. Some of them are 50s. And so I was talking to him when this text comes in. I stopped going to schools around 2011 when I planted a church. And I was just so busy planting my church that I was like, okay, I think I need to focus on this other thing. And then I've received invitations here and there, probably to about 2015, maybe one or two a year. I would say as of 2016 to now, 2025, I had never received another invitation. And I'm talking about this and encouraging my young adults pastor here at our church, at Alpha and Omega, where I serve as the executive pastor under Apostle Alberto Delgado. And this text comes in. And I'm like, confirmation. It's not confirmation that I'm going to do it, confirmation that this is going to start again. And so since then, I've met with my youth pastor, I've met with our young adults pastor, and I've given them the strategy on how to do this. This is not going to happen from one day to the next because the team we created, first of all, this is during school hours. So, volunteers have to miss work. Nobody was paid to do this. These were all volunteers. They have to take time off. So if we're going to have rappers, we'd have to have, a big pool of rappers so they wouldn't be the same ones missing, every single time. And so we'd have one group go, and then we'd have another pool that would go. We'd have different testimonies. Probably took around 60 people to be part of the on-call team in order to make this happen. And I was telling them, I'm like, listen, we didn't build this team overnight. It started that day that I went to the school to complain about a teacher that verbally assaulted my son. And from that point to Rolly jumping on board and us creating the For Real team, and even a little before that we were doing some crazy stuff in the school system. It didn't happen overnight, but it's coming back. There's revival coming. And this podcast is about gangs, but it's about intervention, prevention, and education. And I want to keep talking about those things. In different moments, I'll talk about different parts of it, but it's coming back. The schools are coming back. We're getting ready to jump into the school system. I know it's coming. It's probably going to be in the school year of 2025, 2026, but we're coming back. And we're going to put together a superhero team. That's what I call it. A superhero team that no school could deny, that no school could say, we don't need you here. Because everything that they're dealing with, every single thing that they're experiencing, we have people on the team that have dealt with it and have overcome it. And so we're getting ready to go back. It's important. Those of you that are watching, if you're believers, we need you to pray. We need you to put this in your churches. This is not a one church thing. I mean, obviously I'm here. I'm on staff now as executive pastor. I love my church. But listen, this is too big for it just to be us. This is, some of the members of our For Real team, including Rolly. Rolly was not a member of our church, but he has love for the kingdom of God. And in fact, Rolly's doing some big things. And right now in the school system, we're putting chaplains into every school in Florida, 2 chaplains per school. And he's doing a training. And if you're interested in knowing, because you want to be a volunteer chaplain that gets called when there's a school shooting, when there's a kid that just dies, however, maybe he was shot, like the ones we had in Florida City, or maybe, there's a kid that's really depressed or whatnot. If you want to be on call for that, there will be 2 chaplains assigned per school in all the state of Florida. This is a huge operation. There's some training you got to go through. Rolly knows how to do that. Rolly's going to be training. He's not going to be training the people himself, but he's got a whole staff of people that are going to be doing that. If you're interested in volunteering and reaching kids in the public school system, that's a great way of doing it. We're going to be going back and forming a superhero team the way we did in the past. And apart from the chaplains, apart from the Bible clubs, apart from all these things that that are going on in the public school system, see you at the pole, I think they still do that, different things, we're going to be there. And we're going to be doing assemblies, and we're going to reach every high school. And I'm not going to be the speaker, most likely, only Friday, which I'll be at this school. But I'm going to be behind, giving them the inspiration, giving them, whatever knowledge I have, and just pumping people up. That's what I do. I think if there's one thing I do, is I get people excited about Jesus, because I'm excited about Jesus, because honestly, I should be dead. I've been attempted to be killed 37 times as a pastor, not as a gangster. In fact, I've been attempted to be killed more times as a pastor than as a gangster. And as a gangster, I was thrown in trunks. Things happened to me that were pretty bad. I was beat by the police twice, really bad. And one time I was left for dead. And but as a pastor, you don't know the things I've seen. And just excited. To me, one of the most memorable, I think I'll finish off with this. One of the most memorable stories from the high schools that I could ever remember was the fact that I was invited to do a school assembly at Southwest Senior High School. 9/11/2001. That's a very, very important date. I was scheduled to start the first assembly at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 9, the first plane hit. And by 9:05, 9:07, the second plane hit. And within less than an hour after that, the Twin Towers collapsed. We were holding right here at Alpha and Omega Church, where I'm actually filming this right here, right now. And I'm in our conference room here. Today it's a little different. We switch where we do things at. And there was a pastor's conference, which we do on Tuesdays, the first Tuesday of the month, every month. The pastors of Miami gather at a different church. And it doesn't matter if you're Pentecostal, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, non-denominational. If you're Hispanic, this is the Hispanic pastors. We usually congregate. And we spend 2 hours together. Somebody brings a word, we pray together. That was happening at Alpha and Omega that morning. And I remember I got here, and that we already had it up on the big screen TV where we were meeting. And I'd never seen pastors pray harder than that. Honestly, if you were alive back then, you didn't know what was next. I mean, there was word that there was a hijacked plane coming to Miami. There was a hijacked plane heading to California. There was a hijacked plane going to the Capitol, one going to the Pentagon. We do know later on that one did reach the Pentagon. One did reach or try to reach the Capitol, but it was by heroic men and women that were on that plane that took it back, and it crashed in the fields before it got to our capital and to Washington D.C., which would have been horrible. But I was scheduled to be there at 10, and I was like, "What do I do? What do I do?" Around 10:15, I said, I'm gonna go. Now, mind you, there was news everywhere that the National Guard was at every school and that they weren't letting kids out or in because they didn't know what was next. Nobody knew what kind of attack we were under. After the second plane hit, we knew it was a terrorist attack, and we didn't know what was next. Like I told you, not too long after, there was one going to Washington, to the Capitol, and another one going to the Pentagon that actually did hit the Pentagon. And so there was no one allowed in. Parents were going crazy. People were outside of every school. National Guard was holding people back. And I told all the pastors, I said, I'm going to the school. Like, I got to do this. I don't know how I'm going to get in. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going. And I showed up at the school and I parked my car. And immediately I ran into 2 members of my youth ministry. They weren't gangsters or nothing. Just, servants. Love God. Good kids. Pastor Forte, what are you doing here? I said, I came for an assembly. I don't know how they were on the outside of the school. They weren't inside. And they're like, oh, the schools are locked. They got chains on their doors. You can't get in. I said, follow me. And I walked up to the National Guard and I said, I need to get in there. They said, sir, no one's coming in or out. You can't come in. I said, I need to speak to the kids about Jesus Christ. They said, sir, no one's coming in or out. You need to step away or we're going to have you arrested. And I looked at the guy that was talking to me. I said, in the name of Jesus, take the chains off. The guy just went, and he opened the thing. The 2 members from our church were just baffled that we're the parents everywhere. Nobody else got in except me and them too. Me and them too. And so we're in the school. Obviously, there's no assembly going on because there's nothing happening. Like everybody's just freaking out on what's happening. I don't know how we ended up at one of the schools. I know we went to the Bible club. There was a teacher. Every Bible club has to have a teacher sponsor, at least back then. And we found the sponsor, and she had a group of kids in that classroom. and it was packed, packed. I walked in and I said, "Listen, I'm here because I was going to do an assembly, but instead I came here. The kids were so hungry." Inside of that classroom, we started talking about all the questions were, what's happening with the end times? Is this the end? Is the rapture going to happen? The ones that know a little bit more, is this, is that? And they just asking question after question after question. Obviously, we prayed with those kids. Obviously, we led them to Christ. The ones that were there, it was so easy to lead these kids to Jesus. On 9/11, 2001, everybody was open. That service, that first Sunday service after that, was probably one of the most powerful services I've ever encountered, where more people came to Christ than probably I've ever seen in a regular Sunday service. And it was just actually Thursday night, because we had our Thursday night service, and that Friday night youth service was incredible. Um, God is moving. Get ready, get ready, get ready. Big things are coming. Keep following us. Tell your friends about this podcast. Tell people about what's happening. We're talking here now. It can be told. We're not just here talking and just inventing things. We're telling you real life, modern day miracles of stuff that happened in this city, which I believe ushered in an incredible revival that took place in this city among the gangs and even among the churches and our church, Alpha and Omega. And it's being documented. My kids, and my kids, and much further than that, if Jesus tarries, will know these stories. And I pray that one day it'll be an inspiration to them. And they're able to look back and say, my great, 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 great grandfather did this. Through Jesus, I can do the same thing. Amen. Love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. And can't wait to see you again next Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.
Red is the weather covers me in the night. Time to fall again, we find peace in the light. On the golden streets, we have eternal light. Even in death, JD shine bright. Words from the Bible, techniques of survival. For the present day, Jesus, disciple, represent with your colors. You've been forgiven.